Welcome to TWC Meets the Artist, a series of in-conversations with local artists. I am Danielle Ashak, CEO of the Women's Club. The Women's Club has been meeting on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation for 120 years, the traditional custodians of the land who have been meeting and sharing stories for thousands of years. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This afternoon, the Women's Club presents TWC Board Director Augusta Supple in conversation with Caitlin Sandiford, violinist from Quartet, and Sydney Con alumni. Caitlin is currently completing her Masters of Music, specialising in music education at the Sydney Con. As a violinist and music educator, Caitlin values the importance of exploring all forms of music making, regularly performing, composing, and producing music. Throughout her musical endeavours, she has had the opportunity to explore diverse musical styles, including folk music, electronic, music theatre, Balinese Gamelan, hip-hop, pop, and Western art music. This pluralism in her musicianship translates to her music education practice, with her current research exploring technology in music education, as well as her recent experience integrating the Ableton Push into the high school classroom. Please join me in a virtual round of applause as I hand over to Augusta and Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Danielle, for that wonderful warm welcome, and welcome to you, Caitlin. I know that you're no stranger to the Women's Club, so I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. I know that you've joined us in the Women's Club in person before, so you recognise that this is actually not the Women's Club. This is my home office, and of course, we're really looking forward to hosting you back at the Women's Club sometime soon. But I thought just to sort of start us off, what I might do is I'll share a little clip of yours, actually, if that's okay, which is just to give everyone a bit of a sample of your music. So I think we'll start it from here. Okay. Can everyone hear that? Well, wasn't that just a tone-setting, mood-setting moment to just start us off today? Congratulations, Caitlin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that piece before we dive in?
Yeah, sure. So that's the second movement of a piece I've written called Something About the Ocean. So the first movement is written for string quartet and audience as well. So what we usually do is we have our parts that are pre-composed. It does have some bit of aleatoricism in it, which just means I've given us different notes and we can choose whichever order we play them in. And then we get volunteers from the audience to conduct the rest of the audience in making ocean sounds. So we make an ocean soundscape. And after I wrote that movement, I thought it would be cool to explore kind of what could be under the surface. So all the plucking and that kind of busyness kind of is what I imagine kind of as you dive into kind of the depths, at least of the ocean. And so writing for string quartet is really fun because especially when you have your own string quartet, because you can just say, well, I know Karen really plays really well, like when she does this, so I want to write this for her, and so it's kind of like an intimate experience, and you get everyone locking in together. Yeah, and we also started exploring singing and playing at the same time. So we're still getting there with that. So that was a kind of rough recording, but it's something that provides a different kind of color and kind of complements the string playing as well.
Yeah, I always imagine that it would be quite tricky to sing when you're sort of holding something up underneath your chest.
Yeah, definitely.
A bit of a challenge there, yeah.
Oh yeah, and keeping it simple. So it is good when you are one of the players. You're like, well, I don't want to make it too hard. I want to make it achievable, but still kind of get that sound.
And it's a beautiful relationship when you know, I guess, the relationship between composer and the player, because you can sort of play to those strengths. And also when you really love or appreciate a player, I guess you get to sort of show them off in a certain way.
Definitely. And with both of those movements, they went through many, many drafts. So especially the second movement, I took it to them first, and they were like, nope, it's too hard, like try again. And so I knew what I wanted in my head, so it was a matter of getting that to a place that was reasonable, but still had the effect I wanted.
I'm going to talk a little bit about your composition and your sort of composing process in just a little bit, but I thought it might be good for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from. Did you grow up in Sydney?
Yeah, well, I grew up between Melbourne and Sydney, and so I graduated from the Sydney Conservatorium 2 years ago. So I'm emerging in all aspects of my life. So just beginning, just moved out, just started teaching at a year ago, teaching at a school in Mount Druitt 3 days a week. Just started my master's in music education, and started kind of my research career path as well. And also started exploring music technology.
Yes. Now you mentioned Ableton, which I think is really interesting, and we'll come back to what that is and what that actually means and what your investigation is there. But to take us back a little bit to where it all began for you as a musician and someone interested in music, is this something that has always been in your household, or was there a particular music teacher, or is your mother fanatical? Where did your love of music begin, Caitlin?
Well, I'm told that I begged my parents to get me a violin when I was 3 years old.
Do you remember that?
No, not at all.
So you don't know where that came from? If you saw Nigel Kennedy one day and thought, I'm going to be him?
I assume I saw it on TV or something. I'd love to know who it was. But yeah, I was 3 years old, so I don't remember it. But I'm told, I just kept telling my parents, I was like, oh, I want to, because I couldn't remember the name. And after 3.5 years, they finally got me a violin. They got me into lessons. And my mum is a piano teacher. So she was able to help me practice. We played together, which was really nice. And we still play together sometimes. So it's been in my life since I was 6. And in high school, I had a really enthusiastic, passionate, creative music teacher. He was a composer as well. So he taught us for year 9, 10, 11, and then went off to England to keep composing. But yeah, he helped us expand kind of our view of music and what music could be. As a composer, he encouraged us to be creative, which I think really shaped my musicianship today. Instead of so I did get to play in Sydney Youth Orchestra and have those orchestral experiences, but I also did get to just jam out with my friends at lunch, make up covers to pop songs or like learn some folk music, and I think that really shaped yeah, my direction as a musician.
And there's sort of like this wonderful knowledge that you now have that it only will take 3 years of nagging for you to get what you want from your parents, which I think is always a useful thing to know how long that takes. But also, I guess, having that sort of breadth of experience across genre as well. There are lots of different ways in which violin and musicianship can transform over the life of the maturation of a musician. And you've sort of landed inside this sort of classical space, but you're quite committed to sort of continuously learning and developing your own craft, aren't you? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, yeah, as I was graduating, I got introduced to the world of music technology. On my final prac in music education, I was at Tara, the girls' school in Parramatta, and they had a class set of Ableton Pushes. So they're one of those beat pads, and I had never used
describe what those look like. They're kind of.
You can probably hold one up.
Yes, good.
Yeah. So here we go.
Ah, excellent. What is that? Can you talk us through it?
Yeah, so basically these are pads that you can push. You connect it to the software Ableton Live, and it corresponds to what's happening on the software. So you can choose it to be drum pads, bass lines, chords, melodies. You can automate, or so you can change effects and change the sounds from there's little knobs up the top here. You can also trigger different clips, so different short, sorry, let's put that down, short pieces of music. You can control recording with it, so you might have a microphone connected and you might do some looping with it. There's lots of different possibilities because of the software, but the good thing about it is that it integrates perfectly, so it's as if you're learning a new instrument.
So when you were at Tara and you were there with this pad, what did you discover?
Well, yeah, so it was sitting in the storeroom. I was like, oh, these are so cool. I've never used one before. They're like, well, take one home, learn it, and you can teach it to all the classes in the last 2 weeks of term. I was like, great. Took it home, learned, just played around for hours. It's really exciting having those new experiences of just being in your own world of music, and just it is truly like an instrument in that you get to perform music and then just keep adding layers or keep changing things, changing the sound. And then, yeah, so once I just kind of worked out how it works, I tried a few different ways of teaching it to the students. And because I had recently gone through the learning curve, when they came across an issue, I was like, oh yes, I know that one. And so for that, I used that as an action research project for my 4th year studies, where I kind of looked at what was kind of good about the way I taught it, and kind of what could be improved. And that's what's been the basis for my master's research. So I'm going into 2 different schools, hopefully term 1 next year, COVID allowing, and I'm looking at different ways of teaching it and looking at the affordances and limitations of that, and then kind of putting that together to keep developing resources. And I'm working with Ableton as well to gain their experience and their expertise. Yeah, so that's kind of how it turned into research. It's also turned into my music practice, in that I've started producing music in different styles. So I took a music production course where I did learn how to kind of produce in lo-fi hip-hop, or just lots of different styles to push me out of my comfort zone.
So are you going to be brave enough to tell us explicitly what your research master's topic is, and what do you hope to really get from it? This is a question from Julia Horn, who's a bit of a fan of Quartet. So yeah, I'm just wondering, can you tell us a bit more about the master's research?
Yeah, so I'm taking it into 3 different contexts. So one is outside the classroom, no teachers, what can you learn from Ableton Live, and they have a learning music website. So where it teaches you theory, but without like Western music notation. So it's directly related to the music you would make in Ableton Live. So first context is outside the classroom. Second context is inside the classroom, but it's student-centered informal learning, where the teacher gives students a project goal and check-in points, but there's no explicit, this is how you do this. You need to do this, kind of teacher-led. Then the third one is the teacher-led learning. And so what I hope to see through observations, through interviews and sample work and surveys is what do we get from each of these methods? And, what is kind of a great way to integrate it so we get maximum student engagement, student learning as well.
You must have such an amazing amount of experience watching students, children and young people really sort of explore and experiment with things. Do you think that there's something that is quite, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking around the idea that maybe when you're younger, it's easier to sort of be brave enough to experiment with things. And do you find that with a piece of technology like Ableton, the Ableton Pad, that people are more, I guess, young people are more able to or confident in experimenting with it than, say, being handed a violin or handed an instrument?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because if you set it up right, you can just tell kids to go up and push it, and it's already making sound and it's already sounding professional. Whereas if you do give them a violin, they're going to screech because that's the way it is. But interestingly, I have had experiences this year where I brought my violin to school and I let kids play it and they're like, oh, this is so much fun. Even though it doesn't sound amazing, they just enjoy it and they just want to keep playing it and keep learning. And I've had students who are hesitant to press, even just press a pad. So yeah, it is interesting. I'm not sure why I haven't cracked that code yet, but
well, it's probably one of the mysteries for the ages, Caitlin. So I think that's we'll check in with you in a year's time and see what you're finding in that journey. I think it's interesting to go back to what you said at the very beginning, that at the moment you're at the beginning of things for you, and you're sort of leaping forth in a way, in many different ways. Was this something that was sort of, is it just serendipity, or is this something that you've decided for yourself that now is the time to launch?
Well, I think it's timing with graduating from uni. You kind of step into the real world. And I'm not very good at saying no to things. So I was like, well, I want to be a musician. I want to be a music educator. A master's sounds fun. So kind of just saying yes to all of those things and seeing where they go. And it's just turned out that I really enjoy all of them, especially in like the world of academia. I'm very, very young. Been going to my supervisor and I've been going to online conferences this year, and they've been at night because they're overseas. But everyone is so much older. I was like, I have so much to learn from these people, which is really exciting. And I think I just like learning, which just makes me a nerd, but I'll take it.
Yeah, I think nerds are the best people, Caitlin, so that's fine. I think that's completely fine. It's an interesting thing that you say as well about sort of not being able to necessarily, well, being compelled to say yes or not being able to say no, because last week Karen was talking about how tricky it was for her to sort of, because there is quite a culture of yes, I'll do it, and yes. Do you think that that's something that you're also feeling a bit of the pressure to just sort of gather as much as you can, or is there sort of like you're going to burn yourself out by the time you're 27, like Jimi Hendrix or something? What's the no, is there going to be a time of pacing yourself, or is this something that you're just really sort of driving ahead with?
Well, yeah, I think lockdown was good for something in that it forced me to slow down completely. But Yeah, I know there definitely is a culture of just saying yes. I think partly because we love what we do, so all the opportunities we get are exciting to us. Um, and but sometimes that does kind of result in burning out or just kind of working ourselves too hard. So I think I'm trying to find that balance. We'll see how we go. Again, check in a year.
Yeah,
But
we'll check in with you for sure and just monitor this and make sure, see how you're feeling about it. I'm curious to know that as far as your great sort of compositional inspirations, you mentioned before that you have that you had a fantastic teacher in high school. But are there other composers that you look to or that you think about or you find particular inspiration from?
yeah, well, I think they weirdly enough come from different genres of music. So I saw a Jacob Collier concert. So he's just wild. He does so many different things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
No, but I'm keen to learn more. So
Yeah,
Jacob Collier?
yes, I recommend looking him up. So he came to Sydney and he did this one-man band show. And so he played all these different instruments. He sung his original songs and covers, and they just spanned a whole range of genres. I was like, that's really cool. Like not having to stick in a box, I guess. And so it can be confusing at times. You're like, wait, what am I doing at the moment? Like trying to just focus in on one thing at a time. But yeah, Jacob Collier. Um, there are some composers even at the con. So even my master's supervisor, James Humberstone, he does kind of a mix of, he's classically trained composer as well. And then he's ventured more into hip hop as well. He's collaborating with a Greek Australian spoken word poet slash rapper. So he ran a program at the con in when I was in first year. So we did this big performance that was a fusion of classical and hip hop, and I think that was really fun to take part, to like be a part of that, because again, not fitting into one box, getting to try new things, experiment. And in that hip hop culture, you do just kind of go for it. There isn't just like a right way and a wrong way of doing things. And so I think borrowing from other cultures and other ways of musicking has influenced my kind of creating of music too.
Yeah, and your composition as well.
Yeah.
Has there been a genre of music that you've come across where you really wish that you could just deep dive into it, go on tour, be a part of that culture? Because all the different musics and all the different practices, they have their own subcultures attached to them, really, don't they?
Definitely.
So is there one that you, because you know we would associate you with classical music, you know, but is there a subgenre that you would be curious to explore more?
Well, I really love like South American and Central American music, and the whole culture. It's very collegial. It's just they do it for fun as well, and I think that would be amazing. And all, the music is amazing, and the culture. I did get to go to Brazil a few years ago, but it was for a classical music concert. So, sorry, festival. So it would still had some classical music culture, but it was with mostly South and Central Americans. And yeah, again, that culture of just very relaxed. Everyone's really warm and welcoming and open. It's like, yes, let's make music. It's here for the music. And yeah, I really loved that.
How would you characterize, if there's sort of like this sort of joyousness that Central American music has, how would you characterize Australian music and being inside that sort of culture?
Yeah, well, I think it depends kind of what type. I think contemporary Australian composers, there's an experimentation, which is also really cool. And there is a collegiality in kind of supporting other people's music, going to different concerts, and especially since it is a small community, you do get to know different composers and different small ensembles. And I think that's something I would like to get involved in more, actually.
Mm. And so breaking out of a classical context, or just in small ensembles generally?
Well, I think there are some ensembles doing kind of that are continually evolving.